time. So thank you for being patient with me. So I want to talk about this prick. Hold on one second. Let me see if this will work. Okay. We are going to talk about this prick. You guys can still hear me, right? Press the number 1 if you can still hear me, please. And we'll go ahead and get started because I'm about to tear this guy a new ass. Yeah, I thought it was funny myself. Can you guys hear what I'm saying? All right. So, in case you guys are caught under a rock, Michael Franzese has claimed throughout the years that he's not an informant. Okay. The fact is, he was. He tripled down on this bullshit today with the video, or yesterday, I think it was. And everything he said was like a quarter truth. He said literally he just took a plea, never sat with the government, never told them nothing. And he's lying about that. And tonight we're going to prove it. He said nobody cared about Norby Walters, yet I have an FBI intel memo that they really cared about Norby Walters. He claimed he never helped them. He didn't get a sentence reduction. However, nothing he says is ever really true. He said he refused to cooperate with them, said he would not work with them on any level. But Michael was a rat before we ever knew it. He began ratting in 1980. And so there's a bunch of things we're going to talk about. Hopefully I don't confuse all of you guys. But in December of 1985, this is what we know. Franzese gets indicted in 2 states, one in Florida and one back here in New York. Now remember, Franzese is a real big-time mob guy, all right? You have to pay close attention to some of this. The New York indictment alone, he was charged with 14 counts. In the Florida indictment, he's charged with 177 counts total. Okay, so between Florida and New York, it's 177 counts. That's like 5,000 years in prison. Okay. No, excuse me. I was wrong. I misquoted. Sorry. Let me requote that. The New York indictment, he was charged with 14 counts. In Florida, he's charged with 177 counts, taking total counts against him 191 counts. That's like 6,000 years in prison. On March 21st of 1986, he pleads guilty to 1 count of racketeering out of a total of 191 counts. How does that happen if you're a big-time gangster? How does that happen? He ends up, at the end of the day, after the Florida thing and the New York thing, he's convicted of 2 counts. Okay, 1 count of racketeering, 1 count of fraud. But he only gets 10 years in prison and gets a fine of over $14 million. Now, he was sentenced in Florida to like 10 years, but everything was being served concurrent. But I just find that very odd, okay? Of 191 counts, he's allowed to plead out to 2 counts, which I said was tax fraud and racketeering. In the Florida case, he gets 9 years. With his other sentence, he can serve it concurrent, okay? But my question to all of you is, how is it that the feds make a deal for 2 counts? You're a big-time gangster. You're making $10 million a week and all of this shit, which really wasn't the case. But how do they just let him skate on 177 other charges? Because shortly after going to prison, he becomes a cooperator. The terms of his deal, in return for information about the Mafia, he would agree to testify for 1 year. And anything past that year, he would not testify to in court. So the moral stance that people take with him is just absurd to me. So let's talk about Norby Walters for a minute, okay? Because he likes to claim, well, I did nothing. You know, he was a nobody. Nobody wanted him around, blah, 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 blah. Norby was a racketeer. His father was a racketeer. Walters was shaking down people left and right, taking advantage of music stars, as we know. And Franzese allowed his name to be used to scare people so he could get his kickback from Walters. So he plays this game like, oh, I didn't really know the guy, but yet he calls him an uncle. Like, he says 5 things one day, and then 10 minutes later, he says something totally different. To me, it's just very odd. So Franzese agrees to cooperate with the feds, and he tells them all about Norby Walters because they came to see him to ask him specifically. And I'm going to show you paperwork to prove that. In return for giving up Norby Walters and a lot of other people, Franzese is given immunity for that case. He never mentions this to you. The feds were going to indict him in the Norby Walters case because he lent his name. So Norby Walters would say, well, you don't want to fuck with Michael Franzese, so you better do as I say. He doesn't tell you guys he was going to get indicted on that case. So he gives them up so he can get immunity. And this is direct from the Walters case. And for just so people know, Walters was convicted. He was fined and sent packing to prison for 5 years, but on appeal was able to get out only because of a technicality. But he still did a year. But Franzese testified against him in court. The judge cited in the court paperwork that the importance of Franzise's testimony led to Walters' conviction. Lloyd Bloom, is that a name any of you have ever heard before? I bet you haven't, because that's the other guy Michael testified against in that case who did go to prison. He doesn't mention Lloyd Bloom to anybody. He does 3 years in federal prison because of Michael. Now, how did the Walters case even come up? In 1987, while he was doing time in Terminal Island, he agrees to give information to Edward McDonald, who at the time was the Brooklyn Strike Force head. Franzese gives up ranks, position of power, other city mob leaders, and more. Once the FBI finds out, they take Franzese out of prison. And Franzese then has secret meetings in Chicago. He doesn't tell you that, with attorney Anton Valukas. The agreement was that Franzese would give up information on Chicago guys, Walters, and others. In return, back in Brooklyn, Edward McDonald, would ask for a sentence reduction. So here you go. This is why he's doing it, for a sentence reduction. How about Orange Tutt? Nobody ever mentions him. He was a janitor who Franzese testified against. How about Frankie Campione, who Tutt worked for? Franzese would testify against Gerald Gutterman, who got indicted for conspiring with union officials and mob contracts to defraud the IRS. You ever heard that name before? No, he doesn't mention that guy. He used basically Michael Franzese to buy labor peace and to provide mob protection for work done in construction complexes in New York and in New Jersey for a kickback. So when he says, oh, I didn't testify against mob guys, these are all mob guys. They're all racketeers. They might not necessarily have been Italian, but they were still gangsters. It was, in fact, Michael Franzese who informed that company to shake down the IRS, but suddenly he points the finger and testifies against Gutterman. Franzese gave information about John Riggy, the alleged leader of the DeCavalcante crime family, to U.S. Attorney Brian Gillett. But he refused to testify in that case, but it didn't stop him from bringing up information about Riggy. Keep in mind, Franzese goes to prison in 1986 and more or less, gets 10 years, ends up giving up names, ranks, positions about the mob, including Denver, Chicago, the Lucchese's, the Colombos, the Gambinos, the Genoveses, and gave information about Vinny Gigante and stuff down in Florida. For that information that he gave, his sentence was commuted to 3 years, give or take 3.5, maybe 4. Then there's the boxing investigations. There's a Senate subcommittee regarding Russian organized crime. So Franzese not only put people in jail, but he also testified at Senate hearings, which led to investigation after investigation after investigation. How anybody could say that this creep is not an informant blows my mind. But it gets better. If you guys ever heard of Operation Crown Royal, Operation Crown Royal involved Don King and the Mafia in boxing. How do you think that they even found out about that? I'll give you a clue. Michael Franzese. The Operation Crown Royal began in 1980. Please keep that in your mind? 1980. It was a 3-year investigation. When does Michael go to prison? 85, 86? Oh, wait a minute. That's 6 years before. So just keep 1980 in your brain. Franzese gave an entire dissertation after the fact covering up his own informant ways. The FBI was looking to prove that Don King basically was a nefarious promoter, screwing his boxers out of money, and that fights were fixed. Not only did Franzese have that information, but guess who he works with? Al Sharpton, who was an informant as well. And he works with Al Sharpton to indict people. It was Franzese who tells SA Special Agent Quintana the ins and outs of the crime family's involvement in boxing. The FBI had no clue. Quintana actually meets with Franzese and presses him to try to get a meeting with Don King. This is between 1980 and 1983. And he also wants him to tape that meeting. And the entire idea was basically to impugn Don King and get him indicted. So Michael, this is what Michael does. Michael brings Quintana, who was sort of playing like he was a Latin American drug dealer, and he brings him around his own father, not telling his dad he's an undercover FBI agent. And it was actually at a racket club on Long Island when Sonny meets Special Agent Quintana. Franzese had told his father Quintana was basically a knockaround guy, and Sonny looked at Quintana, and all he says to him is, I hope you don't sell drugs. I don't want my kids around drugs. And Quintana assures Sonny Franzese, because he's playing like this big gangster thug, that he would never do that. So the entire plan was to set up a fake boxing promotion company called TKO Promotions. Special Agent Quintana would play the Latin drug dealer, funding all of the fake boxing promotions. They would set up an office on 31st Street and 7th Avenue in Manhattan. Al Sharpton, who was friends with Don King, had gone bad and was providing intel to the feds. So he and Franzese would go to work together by bringing Quintana around and making introductions, attempting to inflate Quintana's sort of character that he was playing. Quintana and the feds would then dump money into a large office in Manhattan to give the appeal that they were actually a boxing promotion. The first meeting Michael has, he takes a wired FBI agent with him, and it's Agent Quintana to meet Don King. And Don King says on tape, Quintana must be a serious guy about promoting because he was with Michael. And he agrees in principle because he had heard from Sharpton that one of his organizations would get a kickback to help impoverished kids. This is how this all worked. And Don King agrees to help. That was the first meeting. Franzese and Sharpton worked their magic again and got a meeting a second time with Don King. And it was Franzese pushing Sharpton on behalf of the FBI to get that meeting done because Sharpton had closer ties to the Black community and was trusted a little bit more. The meeting was wired for sound, and King gets nailed, as does the IBF president, Bobby Lee. The International Boxing Federation, Bobby Lee, what happens to him? He gets 20 years in prison. Other names that Michael Franzese mentioned, Frankie Flowers D'Alfonso. He told the FBI that Frankie Flowers down in Philadelphia owned all of the cable rights to pay-per-views and stuff like that. He also gave information about Matty the Horse Iannello, John Gotti. In fact, he tells FBI agents twice that John Gotti met with Don King, once on September 20th of 82 at a restaurant in Manhattan called Patrici's. I've never heard of it. And a second meeting that took place December that year of Abe's Steakhouse. So you may be saying to yourself, well, that's fucking insane, right? Oh, it's going to get better, and it's about to get better right now. 1 second. Let me just pull all of these files. All right, let me just look at this one to see what it is. So Franzese claimed on a video today, he claimed today on a video that he never worked, never talked to the FBI ever, right? This is taken directly from an interview that he did a couple of years ago about becoming an informant. And this was what he said. By that point, I had made up my mind I was out of the life. So I didn't have a moral problem with testifying, which is ratting. And I didn't know if I was going to like myself. All right, that's the first thing. Let me get rid of that because there's a couple of things we have to go through. All right, let me put this over here. So he continued in his video to talk about how he gave them nothing, right? He gave them nothing. Gave them nothing. Did he now? This is the Agent McDonald. I don't know if this is on the screen. Okay. Federal officials said that Franzese had testified before at least one grand jury, but refused to give details on what information he had provided. McDonald, who was the Brooklyn Strike Task Force guy, said that it was enough to make a pact with the government worthwhile. So in other words, he gave up information that they could use against people. Otherwise, the FBI under no circumstances is going to deal with him. Okay. Let's go to this next one. Okay, let me pull this up. And the stuff I'm showing you is from FBI files and stuff like that. His willingness to testify astounded the organized crime and racketeering section of the Justice Department in Washington. McDonald was ordered to renew talks with Franzese to get him to sign a cooperation agreement. Franzese didn't like McDonald, and the negotiations dragged on inconclusively for weeks. Then McDonald had an inspiration. We stuck him in county jail, some jerk Watertown in Illinois. Here is this major mafioso from New York getting checked out by all these low-level petty thieves. The next day, we negotiated. In May 1989, a month after Norby Walters was found guilty, Franzese set his name to the cooperation agreement and walked out of jail. That means he did 3 years, signed a cooperation agreement, and they let him out of jail. A guy who had 177 counts against him. That makes sense, right? Of course it does. All right, let's see. I got more coming. And then I'll go back to the chat. Okay. Almost done. I think this is the right one. Franzese will be compelled to testify in the so-called Windows case. Shortly before his agreement expired, Genovese boss Vincent DeCingigante and other top echelon mobsters were accused of rigging bids. Franzese agrees he may be asked to testify in the Windows case, but he adds, we'll have to see what happens. They have the ability to call me in the Riggy case, and I never got to stand. He's not saying I would never cooperate. He's not saying that I would never, ever do that in a million different years. I got just a couple of more, and then we'll be done. Let me just get rid of this. Okay. Let me look at this one. Okay, this is kind of an interesting thing because Michael says he was never involved in murders and anything like that. However, on this FBI 302 that I'm about to pull up, he says something very interesting. I don't want you to focus on the top part. I want to focus on the second paragraph. I know it's hard to see, guys, but it says Franzese, we're right here. Franzese was asked to comment that he allegedly authorized the murder of an individual on at least 2 separate times. Franzese commented that he had no problems discussing with interviewing agents the areas of questioning that were being pursued and the allegations that he authorized murdering people. Franzese desired to explain that he has attempted in the past to provide all this information to the FBI, and in particular, FBI Special Agent Dan Lyons. Franzese stated that Lyons, under the conditions of his agreement with the Eastern District of New York, sought permission of Strike Force Chief Edward McDonald to discuss murder cases. Franzese stated that Lyons, at a later date, advised him that McDonald was not interested about interviewing him about murders. So he admits in FBI 302 paperwork that he was willing to give them information about murders, but it only could be with a certain FBI agent. I don't know what else. Let's see. Let me pull this one up. Okay. So remember when he said Norby Walters was a fucking nobody and nobody cared about him? Nobody wanted to know anything about him? Well, that's not exactly true. Okay, it says Michael Franzese was, and this was 1989. Franzese was advised of the identity of the interviewing agents. Franzese was advised that he was being interviewed under the conditions of a previous agreement he entered into with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois. So now he's working with the Chicago FBI. and that this agreement provided information to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and other representatives of the U.S. Attorney's Office under the use of immunity, meaning no matter what he said. So when I told you guys earlier that he would give up information and testify against Walters as long as he got immunity, that's exactly what this is. Franzese was advised that his interview would probably become part of a public proceeding in an upcoming trial of Norby Walters. He was further advised that he was interviewing agents wanted to discuss with him the allegations that he was involved in murders. Franzese stated that he's never himself personally participated in the murder, blah, 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 blah. And then he says in October 31st of 75, he was made with Jimmy Angelina, Sally Mischiata, Jerry Brown, John Minerva, and Vito Guzzo. But it's important because he sits there and tries to claim that he 100% nobody cared about Norby Walters, but here he goes doing it anyway. And I think this is the last thing I'm going to show, and then I'll open it up to you guys. Let me just pull this up. Hold on 1 second. I think there's one more. Or is that it? Hold on. Nope. That's not it. I think the other thing that I had. Yeah, I think. Oh, wait, there's more over here. Hold on a second. Yeah, I think that's all I'm going to show. There's more that I can put out, but I'm going to sit on some of it. But that's the whole thing. You can't be wishy-washy and say nobody cared about that guy. I didn't testify against anybody. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. But you did. But you did. You got 100%. You got a sentence reduction for cooperating with the federal government. And it all comes back to what I'm about to post. This says everything. He can say whatever he wants from now until, he can say it from now until the day he fucking dies. By that point, I had made up my mind. I was out of the life. So I didn't have a moral problem with testifying. My problem was I didn't know if I was going to like myself. And we showed you the other one where he knew he was going to get immunity, and that's why he talked about Norby Walters. And that's just the beginning. There's so much more. But he can't say that he didn't inform on anybody. The fact that the boxing investigation started in 1980 and went to 1983. The fact that he took an FBI agent to go visit his father and didn't tell his father he was a fucking Fed. Why isn't he saying any of that? And by the way, the information that I gave you about him going to see his father with an FBI agent was all in Special Agent Quintana's debriefings. So he can't say I made that shit up. He's not going to be able to talk his way out of it. The best thing that he can do is just straight up say, it is what it is. It is what it is. Yes, that's exactly what it is. It was closed circuit. That's right. Absolutely. I'm going to go back up in the chat, guys, because I think I missed some stuff. I am going to drop the link if anybody wants to come on. I know there's at least 2 people that do. But I just wanted to put it out there because he said in his video, well, I want you guys all say that you do research. Go ahead and do it. Well, I did it. And guess how long it took me to do that? Guess how long it took me? 20 minutes, 25 minutes. There's absolutely no reason for him to be talking about organized crime in the boxing industry. And this is in 1980. This is 6 years, 5 years before he ever gets pinched. You can't defend that. You can't defend that. Your own paperwork says opposite of that. Yes, I agree. Gravano is a scumbag. To me, when I watch Franzese, it's like he's still trying to prove something. Like, dude, you're over 50. Wait, you're over 50 with millions. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Do we believe Sammy Gravano that he ratted because John Gotti wanted him to take the blame? No, I don't buy any of that. Gravano knew himself he was going to look bad. And he just did not want to absolutely. He was never a boss to anything but his own delusions and craziness. I am doing good. I am doing good. I'm scrolling through the chat a little bit, guys, just to make sure I didn't miss anything, and I'll come back to your comments. Let me go up. Maybe it was a little bit up a little bit further. Okay, so I'm going to address you because you go in every chat and start shit with people. Okay, I'm going to make this statement. If I have extra stuff laying around that people can use, that's what I do. Don't give me the fucking line of having a stance, because I'm going to tell you something, bright person. I have been a guest on other people's show where other people called me a rapist online for months, and they had no problem putting them on their show, did they? So don't be two-faced and hold your own fucking standard. Don't you go in somebody else's show that's accused of like beating women? Yeah. So don't come here with that. Don't come here with that. In fact, fuck off. It's so ridiculous to me. I have to fight with everybody because everybody fights. If I do something nice for somebody, it's just to help somebody else. Nobody helped me coming up. Nobody. I did this all on my own, right? I invested in myself. So if I have extra electronics laying around and I want to give it to somebody because they're moving in another direction, I'm going to do that. What person A has to say against person C, D, and fucking E has nothing fucking to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. It's not my problem. It's not my concern. People need to learn to just mind their own fucking business once in a while. Seriously. Or you try to be friends with somebody and there's another channel saying filthy, despicable things, and they go over there on that channel. Like, I don't care. I just do my own goddamn thing. That's it. No, I can't, Rebecca. I'm not allowed to do anything for anybody. I'm not allowed to fucking just live my life and be peace-free. I always have to be fucking suckered into some nonsense. It's stupid. It's stupid to me. But I think there's a giant hypocrisy when there's been a million channels I've been on. It's not one or two specific. It's a bunch. And these motherfuckers will call me a fucking rapist all over social media. The hosts fucking know it. And they still have them on. They don't give a fuck about my feelings. So that's how I feel about it. I did something nice for somebody. If I go to hell for it, then so fucking be it. I don't give a fuck, but I'm just